Hey, this is Jeanne Robertson. I am on a radio interview with the famous Rick Roberts. May I call you back?
Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Thanks to Bishop J. Donaldson for taking care of sponsoring this episode through Patreon, where he's a member of Club 52, each week receiving a little prod, a little something to get you going in your comedy business. If you want to find out more about that, check us out online at schooloflaughs.com and click on, just go /Patreon, and you'll learn all about that. Hey, I'm super excited. I can barely wait to turn this interview over to you guys. Recently, I got to meet up with actually one of my favorite comics of all time. She doesn't call herself a stand-up comedian, doesn't call herself a comedian. She calls herself a humorist. But back, I don't know how many years ago, I started listening to SiriusXM radio when it first came out. And on the Clean channel, Laugh USA, I was listening for myself. But I also heard a lot of people I had never heard before. Carl Hurley is one that comes to mind, but also Jeanne Robertson. These were storytellers that had great comedic balance in their stories. And man, every time I heard a Jeanne story, it was just so good. And the reveal at the end, the ultimate surprise, is such a great twist. Every single one of her stories got me. And the laughs were there all along the way. I mean, she may not be trying to get, a laugh every 16 seconds, but she is definitely delivering on funny and on comedy and on punchlines. So I listened to her then, and then, saw that she started touring and doing theaters. I thought that was cool. And I'm like, how did I miss her in the comedy club scene? It's because she never did comedy clubs. Jeanne started out early on. You'll hear in the interview a little bit about her. She started off after a Miss North Carolina pageant, telling some funny stories and then getting booked to do that more and more, and then became a speaker that had a few points, mainly finding the humor in everyday life, until now where she's selling out theaters. Pretty impressive overall. She talks about her journey, how she did it. We met at the National Speakers Association conference just a couple of weeks ago, and she was nice enough to pop in on a session where we're teaching other people humor techniques. That session put on by Karen Eddington, who you've heard in the podcast before. I'll link to her episode in the show notes. Also along in that session was Jess Pettit. She has been on the podcast as well. And in that session also was Devin Henderson, who I just recorded a podcast with, and he'll be in an upcoming episode. So lots of familiar faces and names that were there. Anyway, Jeanne participated. She got to do some of her comedy, which ultimately just tore the room apart. She's so funny. And she broke down how she goes about her writing process. All of this is information you need to get between your ears and down on paper. So I'm going to step back and turn it over now to the interview with Jeanne Robertson. Well, I'm on the phone with one of my favorite comedy legends, and I finally got to meet her here recently, Jeanne Robertson. How's it going today, ma'am?
Doing great. We had a great time. We were on the program together at an NSA convention. Great to meet you too, Rick.
Hey, it's great to finally meet you. And just real quickly, we were at the National Speakers Association conference, and you've been a member, an active member, for how many years? I'm just curious.
I joined in 78. I became president, I think, in 85, and I have not missed a meeting. I'm busy like you are, but I never go to the meeting that I don't learn something that either makes me funnier or helps me run my business better. And now my friends are all there, and I hope you're one of my new friends.
Hey, I hope I am one of yours as well. It's been 5 years for me that I've been part of the conference, and like you said, usually within the first hour, the first meeting, I've written something down that's going to more than pay for the conference, and then everything after that's just gravy, and the friendships evolve from that, and you look forward to the lunch times and the dinners as much as you do the meetings, don't you?
Well, you do, and your listeners can try to envision about 1,500 professional speakers, humorists, comedians, motivational people, trainers, all of us. The one thing we have in common is if there's a group, we like to be the one up front.
Yes.
So that's the one thing that we all have in common, and even if it's a person who's does all day training sessions, which I just don't do. I'm a humorist, but I can learn from them, and so we have a good time.
Yeah, and sometimes I wonder if we ought to invite the Professional Listeners Association to join us so somebody's listening to all the people talking.
I know it. So what's happening where you live?
Well, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a country guy. I grew up in Kentucky and live down here in Nashville now. And I know you're in North Carolina. Were you born and raised there?
I wasn't born here, but I was brought up here, and you will not, with you from Tennessee and Kentucky, you will not need an interpreter for my accent
No.
at all. I knew you were in Nashville. I'm going to have a show by myself at the Ryman in September.
Yeah, I've got that circled on my calendar. Are you recording your new project then?
No, I'm not recording again in March. That'll be the 9th DVD, full-length DVD with new material. But taping at the Ryman is another story. So these people have been nice enough to invite me to come in and do a show, and I'll go with that, and we hope we fill it up. We've sold about half of the tickets, and it's here we are, not even halfway in July. So I'm very excited. Oh, by the way, I went over to the Ryman, flew over and took a couple of buddies of mine in March, and we saw Carol Burnett there.
Oh.
And she's 84. She walked out. She did an hour and a half. The women will be impressed with this. In heels.
Oh, my.
Blew us away. Absolutely blew us away. She showed some clips that were hilarious. And, of course, Tim Conway was there. Was unbelievable. And
yeah.
You can just, I was thrilled with watching her. And I wanted to meet her, and I did get to meet her briefly, and she just was lovely. But watching her work in my shows, I will say, ask me 3 questions. I don't have any questions planned. And I do it in the middle. I've seen people come back out and do this type of thing, but I want to make sure I close with something that's an anchor story that's really funny, since I'm supposed to be funny. Mm-hmm. And then I'll say, if I can't make the audience laugh with my answer, I'll give you a DVD. And what I have found is, on the first question, the people sort of sit there, but then by the second question, they catch on, and up go the hands, and third. Well, Carol Burnett's entire show is apparently, if you just looked at the surface, she's answering questions. She used to do this at the end of her television show. Of course, it was taped, could be edited, and it was a hit with everybody. But I watched her, Rick. It was like just watching a pro. She could turn your question. She knew where she was going with those answers. She knew she was going to work in this clip of Harvey Korman and Tim Conway in the dentist office. She knew she was going to do her Gone with the Wind, show her Gone with the Wind clip. And so you could have gone all 3 nights, and you would have gotten different stories and different ad libs and that kind of thing. But she had some definite things that she was going to always work back to, and she was a real pro at getting right where she wanted to go.
Yeah,
those questions.
It's pretty amazing to see somebody that's done it for that amount of time, and she still knows her audience probably better than they know themselves, and she's able to string those stories together in a way that, probably seems off the cuff to everybody else, but she kind of knows the main question she's going to get. And
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, they want to hear her do her famous that kind of thing. So she gets that out of the way. I mean, she was perfect. And what was so funny the night I went, when we went in, they were checking security at the Ryman, and a lady said, "I know you." And I thought, really? Because I'm not a household name. She said, "I just put your picture down." And we went inside, and there were 2,300 seats at the Ryman. I think that's correct. And they had put a picture of me in every seat with the date of my show. And I said, I don't understand this. And then it gets back down to, let us never forget that comedy is a business. They said the same people that are bringing you in brought her in. So why would they not try to sell tickets to 2 similar audiences, clean humor that's original and that kind of thing? Well, I was flattered. I was just so flattered. I said, well, I'd have come back the other 2 nights for her show if I'd known. So for many of us, and I'm sure many of your listeners right now, being funny is a business, and you have to remember that. And I've done this now for 54 years. I just didn't choose to go the comedy club route.
And so when you first started, did you start with speaking first, and then comedy became a bigger part of it, or were you looking for
No, from the beginning, I was funny. What happened? I was a rising junior at Auburn University. I went home. I was called by my local JCs to be in the Miss Graham, North Carolina, Graham pageant, and it led up to the Miss, as we say in the South, the Miss America pageant. and so I went home and I entered. There were 6 of us, and I won. And so that enabled me that summer to enter the Miss North Carolina pageant. And it was the largest in the nation at that time, and 4 nights, and was on statewide TV and so forth. And barefooted with my hair mashed down at that time, I was 6 feet 2 inches tall and had been. So all of a sudden I won that, and I did a funny talent. And so I became that real tall Miss North Carolina that there were only 3 television channels. Everybody was watching it that night in my state. And I didn't realize it exactly, but I had to drop out of school for a year, and I toured, and I made more than 500 little speeches in 1 year. And I was 19 years old and turned 20. And it took me, like many of your listeners listening, you'll know what I mean. It took me about a week to realize I was going to be asked to speak at every one of these little stops. And if I said something funny and they laughed, I got more invitations. Plus, I had a ball. They were having fun, and I was too. So I began to just really move forward. Before long, they were saying, look, she can cut a ribbon for your bank, but do you need her to do 20 minutes? She loves to just keep telling stories. Or I'd go to a pageant. So I crowned the next Miss North Carolina a year later, and the following week I spoke at 4 meetings in North Carolina, and I never looked back. All I was doing then was banquets and conventions. I got some points as it kept growing and growing and growing. I went back to school, and I kept flying somewhere every weekend and entertaining people, mostly back to North Carolina. But word of mouth. This was pre-cassette. It was about everything. My first mimeograph paper was purple on it that people would sniff. Was my first brochure. And so, but it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, I just said, if I could not be teaching and could really print a brochure and mail it out and go far away places, word of mouth was it. But what I had also had to do, if I wanted to do the corporate and the association speeches, and I did, I had to have a message or a point, and I put together some points on developing a sense of humor. And I just kept going. And then in my 60s, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And when I was in my 60s, I embraced the internet. I encourage everyone to do this. I don't do everything on it. I don't do every single social media, but I figured out what would do different things for me. And at the same time, SiriusXM started playing me every day on the family comedy channels. And then some people, I think Al McCree in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
Al came to me and said, I think you can sell your stories on iTunes. And my question was, I was writing my own material. I always had. I said, well, who's going to go to somewhere like iTunes? Isn't that music? Why would they go there? He said, well, we can figure it out. And then he came back to me after we figured that out and said, okay, we think you have name recognition. Now, here's something important for your listeners to understand. When a person selects a speaker for a meeting, a chamber banquet, all the way to a national convention, a corporate meeting, they virtually have 3 choices. On one end of the spectrum, they can get a free speaker. A politician is always available.
Right.
They can get somebody who's just won an honor. They may or may not be good, but your budget is very low, and you've just got to fill the slot. You're just welcome almost for a warm body to come in there. On the other end, way on the other end, you have celebrities. You will pay them a lot of money to come. The celebrity fees go way, way up. They may be a good speaker, but they may not be a good speaker. And this is why they could have earned their celebrity by winning a lot of golf tournaments. They could have done something famous and got their names in the paper. They could be a famous actor. And people are thrilled that they're coming to their convention. And again, politicians with big fees come in. But they don't have to be good. And in the middle, there we are, Rick. We are people who are professional speakers. You're going to pay us. But but there shouldn't be a chance of us being good. That's why we're there.
Right.
This is what we do for a living. And again, there are different fees for different budgets. And so everybody, you're not doing brain surgery in your first speech. You do a speech, and people always want to know, how do you get the first one? How do you keep going? And there's little tricks you can do. And, well, I'd say not tricks as much as good advice, but you begin, as you begin to hear meeting planners say, "Oh, we can pay you. We'd love to have you. Book it. Let's book it." You hear that enough, you think, maybe I should raise my fee. This is a little more interesting. And then you have meeting planners say, "Look, Jeannie, we'd have paid you 3 times what you charge, because they're just trying to help you." So you go on up in the business and you get bigger things. So when they came to me after the SiriusXM and selling and putting them up on YouTube, I went viral on YouTube and so forth several times. Then this same guy, Al McCree from Nashville, came back and said, "Look, we think you can sell tickets." And I said to him, now that you know the meeting world, I said, "Well, to whom?" Because when you book a convention speech, Rick, you don't sell tickets.
Right.
You go to the room. There the people are. When you do a theater show, or as often is called a concert, when you do those, people go to Ticketmaster or somewhere, buy 2 tickets, get in their cars, and come just to see you. And I said, "I just don't think I have that name recognition." And he said, "Well, let's give it a shot." And we booked Dallas, sold out within 2 weeks. So we knew 2 things from our business standpoint. Number 1, I did have some name recognition. Number 2, if I sold out in 2 weeks, we had a theater that was too small. Now I'm doing concerts all over the country, and that's why I'm going to be at the Ryman in September. And I walk out on stage, I have a ball. Someone said to me in speaking, "What's the difference, Jeannie, in being a convention speaker and walking out on stage and doing an hour and a half?" Well, there's a big difference. At a convention, you got to have points. You've got to have a message. You've got to have sometimes continuing education credit.
Right.
And I mean, all this I did find out I couldn't just walk out and be funny. I'm not a stand-up comic type, but I do have a message. But my message is, look for the humor around you every day. It's there. So I'm having a ball. I'll be 74 soon, and I'm as busy as I can be. And we're just doing these theater shows and having a ball. So that, in a nutshell, is how I went from standing there with a crown on my head, telling about being a 6'2" basketball player in the Miss America pageant, all the way now to being a grandmother with a husband that I call Left Brain. And I've just changed my material completely every decade.
Sure.
Just a second. I didn't turn my phone on. Just a minute. Listen to this. "Hey, this is Jeanne Robertson. I am on a radio interview with the famous Rick Roberts. May I call you back?" Who is this?
Hey, sorry to barge in the middle of the podcast. This is Rick, and I just wanted to let you know I found out just moments ago that my episode of the PureFlix Comedy All-Stars is now available on pureflix.com. If you like clean entertainment, you might like PureFlix, PureFlix.com. Log in, sign up for a 30-day free trial, and check out the Comedy All-Stars, hosted by Sinbad, Louis Anderson, and Jeff Allen. I'm on the season with Jeff Allen. All right, just wanted to share that with you. Now back to the episode.
I am sorry, and I apologize. I've turned my cell phone off. I'm sitting here in my home office, and so I just forgot it. But don't you just love it when people say, "Call me back,"
Yeah.
and then you call them back? They can't do it. But the comedians, I think the comedians' sole goal is to make the majority of the people laugh. They can do so at anyone's expense, because if people come into a comedy club, they ought to know that.
Mm-hmm.
They can go for the jugular. They can hit race, religion, politics, all of this. For the humorist, if you're working anything other than a comedy club or a straight entertainment slot, all you do when you use that type of material is hurt the meeting planner's chances of keeping his or her job.
Yeah,
because their owner of their company comes up immediately and says, "Did you hear this woman beforehand?" What you want them to come up to the meeting planner is to say, "Where did you find her?" And if half of their people are upset or angry about directing comments at their religion, or if you've gone off into politics, half your group's going to be mad, period.
Yeah. I think
and
you do a great job of keeping the stories not only, clean and appropriate and all that, but to write 8 different, comedy specials basically in your time. You're telling stories that are timeless, I think, too. When I was growing up, I have to say it now, the good Bill Cosby was telling these stories that were timeless, and if you went back and put those records on now, they'd still hold up. And I think your stories are the same way, because you're exploring human nature and, communication. You brought up Left Brain a little while ago. For people who are just now finding out about you, tell me a little bit how the first Left Brain story, and then.
Okay, I know exactly. I was in my 60s, and I mentioned my husband, but I'm going to say that you're exactly right. I cannot compete with the not daily writers of the comedy late night people. I mean, so I don't want to waste any time quite frankly, I don't want to get involved with half of my group getting upset, but I don't want to waste my time writing a piece of material that's been done to death and already on TV and everything in 3 days, if not less than that, and flying around. And I want a story that everybody has a chance to identify with, and they want to be able to say, she's been a fly on my wall. The same thing happened to me. And that's all. Everybody gets arm flab, Rick. Men and women get arm flab. And if you're talking to a certain age group, you want to talk about and poke fun at yourself about the things. Now, in my 60s, one time, I just said something about my husband, Jerry, and then I just stopped and said, well, actually, I call him LB for left brain because he is. Well, that's all I had. Uh-huh. But the reaction in the audience was so great. I was finding myself thinking in that second world we get in sometime when we're on stage. Mm-hmm. I was talking, but I was thinking, get off this stage and get to a tablet and pencil. These people identified with that. And so then when I started looking at Left Brain and said, why did I call him Left Brain? And then the Don't Send a Man to the Grocery Store was about sending Left Brain.
That's one of the best things ever.
Well, let me tell you, it's a challenge. I'm trying to decide what to do. When I taped it, it now has 9 million hits. And, of course, compared to people that have 400 and 500 million hits, our friend Judson Lampley has 400 million, I think. Mm-hmm. But then I have like 44 million. but they're just, I just put up a clean story every so often, and there she goes. But when I taped that story, and here's another thing, you get better, but your tapes never do.
Right.
And you know yourself that stories grow. Mm-hmm. And so when I taped that initial story, it was right under 8 minutes. It's now over 14.
Oh, wow.
So I like the newer version much better, but you don't want to mess up something. So we don't know whether to tape the newer version and put it on up for the heck of it and see if people like it, the longer version, like at this concert, or just leave well enough alone. It almost pains me to listen to the almost 8 minute version when I know it's such a better story now.
Yeah, you might want to put together a CD just called Best Stories Revisited or something, and have
new stories. And we have an opportunity to do that with good footage and camera work coming up, and so it just probably would even go in and retape it that night for the heck of it to have it.
Obviously, he's been a good sport about all of it over the years. Has he got any stories on you he's holding back?
Well, he wouldn't dare. No, I'm kidding. People who know him, he's a very quiet man, and people who know Jerry, a.k.a. Left Brain, know that he will come to me. I mean, he's always supported me in what I've done. I don't say that you have to have a spouse, but if you have one and they're not supportive, it's very hard to have a traveling job and on stage and poking fun. He will say to me sometimes, I did something you might be able to use. Sometimes Rick, he doesn't get it. But he's just such a delightfully nice person. Interestingly enough, I've added a sentence in my speeches, and I know would want to be comedians and comedians listening in, that really gives the audience permission to laugh when I poke fun at Left Brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a story about left brain. The name of the story is "Don't Ask a Man to Bring the Luggage."
Okay.
Left brain bringing the luggage to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was a really good story. And I've been going through my little steps that I go through to work a story in. And I told it in conversation. And then I snuck it into a speech. And all. I came back and I told him this was going to be a winner. And it has been a winner. And then somebody locally asked me to speak at the Boy Scout banquet here to raise money, and I did, and Left Brain went. Well, see, everybody in that audience is from our little town, and they know Jerry. I said, this is a perfect place to try this story out because it involves you trying to bring that luggage that time. And I got up and told the story, and we got in a car, and he said, I thought you said people liked that story. Did you hear how quiet it was? And we realized they know Jerry. And they like Jerry, and they immediately became concerned that I was making fun of Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
So I had not given them permission for me to do that. And so what I say, and it's true in every speech, is I love this man. He's my best friend. I would not talk about him if it hurt his feelings.
Yeah.
And then, of course, being a humorist, I have to add, but he is not here, that kind of thing. But I let them know where we stand on this. I'm not a Phyllis Diller. You remember Phyllis Diller?
Oh, yeah.
She talked about her husband, Fang. They divorced. They didn't like each other. I mean, we don't have a Phyllis Diller-Fang relationship.
Gotcha.
So I want the audience to know that and give them permission without, he doesn't really like to go so much because people will stop. When I talk about him, they turn to him and they mouth to him, did that really happen? So he sits in the back. But do you see what I've done when I do that? I've said it's okay. We love each other, and it's fine it's fine with him that I tell this.
That's great.
And then it's okay. They laugh.
Yeah, you mentioned there that you have some steps you go through when you're getting a story together. One is, having a little bit of it in conversation, and maybe in your speeches and stuff. Can you kind of walk us through?
I sure can. I keep a keep a humor journal. I don't keep one of these journals where you've what did I eat for lunch, and I went over here for lunch and I saw Susie. On everything that I do in my day, which I travel for my day, I list those things, and then I try every time I encounter. If I'm riding to the airport, I'm listening to talk radio. I'm listening for somebody to say something funny. I don't want to take somebody's piece of material, but something that can trigger my memory. I'm already listening. Then you check in. Even if you use the kiosk, you got to go take your bags over there. Then you sit next to people. You listen to the flight attendants. Do you see that I'm going through my day?
Mm-hmm.
When I land, I engage in conversation. If the people behind me are laughing on the plane, I lean my head back and try to listen. Why are they laughing? Are they good friends? What are they talking about? Then when I get there, if the cab driver speaks English, or I speak the same language the cab driver speaks, I may say, how long have you been driving Uber or the cab or whatever? And usually they'll say, oh, man, I've been driving for years, and I let that sink in a while. And I say, I bet you've seen some funny stuff. Oh, I could write a book. Okay. And then I'll say, tell me something funny. Well, you get a lot of bad stuff. But, Rick, you get ideas, too.
Uh-huh.
Now, I have not even gotten to the hotel. And then I engage the person who's taking my luggage to the room. I deliberately, when I could roll it by myself, will, get the kid and say, how long have you been doing this? Boy, and so if you write in, now you don't get something in every category every day. Then by the end of the year, you got 400 or 500 little possible stories. Sometimes they just are a story that happens, and you can tell that night, which is impressive.
Right.
Do you see? Okay, but the rest I take them and work on. So when January starts, I have a list of, say, even 30 or 40 things I really think that I worked on through December, which I take off, that are ready to be tried. And then you just start trying. And here's another list. You have that as a list. If you're in your room in the hotel and you're ready to go and speak to that morning session, I want to try one new story. I talked about this in that session with you last week. I want to try one new, either one-liner or story in every program. But if you haven't done your legwork and have your list ready to go, you get ready to leave the room and I say, what am I going to tell her as new? And, I just won't do it this time.
Right.
But if you have a list, they say, okay, I'm going to try this one. And then you have somewhere in your speech or your routine or your set to try it in. and then follow it with a surefire winner. That means you're just rolling all the time with it. And I'll tell you, I've tried a lot of things I thought were going to work, and they didn't. But you just thought, maybe I didn't put in the words they needed to know for this to be funny. And a lot of times that's it.
Right.
You didn't set it up well enough. This has got to be. So it's a rolling process of gathering the material. And while I'm gathering it, I've already got this other list I'm working on from last year. Does this all make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Okay. So you're just always working, trying to spit it out, journalize it, do these kind of things. So it's fun for me. When I get home, I have my assistant of 38 years, Tony, and left brain, and even some of my good friends. I say, so tell me what you're trying out that's new. Mm-hmm. Or Tony will say, what'd you try out that was new? And they have probably heard it because I had tried it in conversation. If 2 or 3 people will laugh, and again, I don't want to tell material that attacks people because everybody feels a little uncomfortable. And I want to they laugh before they even think. And if I say it and 2 or 3 people laugh, then wait a minute. If 2 or 3 people laugh, 2,000 will laugh. 200 will laugh if you tell it right.
Right. That's great.
In other words, I can be funny, but here's another thing. If I sit down next to somebody at a banquet, I can tell you if I'm the speaker what they're going to ask me. Mm-hmm. How'd you get into this? Do you see? Yeah. And all of a sudden, I'm spending the banquet talking about me, all the stuff that I already know. I am wasting my time. I turn it on them and say, how long have you been coming to this convention? Do you have children? What's the funniest thing you've ever seen happen at the convention? Oh, and then her husband might lean over in front of her and say, don't you remember that year such and such happened? And trust me, when I get back to my room, I'm writing it down.
That's great.
It's maybe not a complete story, Rick, but it could be the rule of 3, your third thing, or it could be a punchline. The punchline to the baton story that I mentioned earlier, which for a long time was my anchor story, and then I put it on sabbatical. I said, I can't tell this anymore. I've got too many other stories over here. Now, if I'm going back, last year I went back to Atlanta for 5 years in a row with shows. I told the baton story. Do you see? Because I needed it by that time. But the punchline in the baton story, which I won't tell you, but I got it off of something somebody had said at a pageant. And I said, that was a funny line, but I didn't have a story for it.
Right.
But bam, when the baton story happened, I knew I did. And I don't know if you've heard a story called A Mother's Revenge.
Yes.
Okay. I had to wait 29 years to get the punchline. Wow. Because until my son went to college and, my grandson went to college, what happened with my son wasn't as funny. So the minute it happened 29 years later, I said, whoa. I had been always telling this story at dinner parties and things, and they'd say, do you tell that in your speeches? And I would say, no, y'all might not get it, but that's just not funny enough at the end. And I just couldn't get anything. And then when something happened with my grandchild, it was like I just stood up, started walking around my office thinking, I've got it for the old story.
Right.
So you just save everything and wait and see what happens with it and give your material a chance to grow.
Well, I tell you, that's good advice. And if nothing else comes from that, you start enjoying every day better by tuning into the funny stuff and not the negative stuff. But having that list to go to and listening for personal stories and that's key.
All the time. What happened is I was in, and I tell it in speeches, I was looking for humor for my speeches and for books and for columns, period. I was in the Atlanta airport, and when they cancel all the flights, it's Mecca for a humorist.
Oh, yeah.
I used to say I would go to school openings and just pray the banner would fall off the wall. Right. You go with things planned, but you're just hoping something like that happens. So in the Atlanta airport, it not only had all the flights been grounded for a bad storm, it was apparent we were going to be there a while. And people just go nuts. I literally was changing my seat in different gate areas where I saw whole family groups with children and so forth, waiting this thing out, just seeing was any group being funny. And all of a sudden, back in my own gate area, it hit me. Everybody in my gate area was angry. I mean, everybody's connection was going to be, but I wasn't. I was so busy looking for the humor that I had affected my own temperament.
Right.
And that's when it hit me. Wait a minute. This is not only a good tool for speeches. This is a good tool just for living your life and traveling all the time. These are the steps to developing a sense of humor, not comedic timing. These are steps because I know, and you do too, you know some hilarious people, Rick, who don't have a sense of humor.
Right.
You bet there'd be a problem. They cause trouble. And then I know some people who never try to be the one on stage, the stand-up comic, but if you work with them often, you realize they're going to be pleasantly the same.
Yeah.
They have a delightful sense of humor. So I just believe it can be developed. And I had these steps that I did, and I'll throw in one of them in a concert, but I'm basically there to entertain in a concert. And if you're at a convention business, and in the convention business, I feel very comfortable being called a humorist because I'm not a stand-up. I don't do what I admire, what people like y'all who do that do. But they're cousins, though, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
They're not identical twins, but we're in the same family.
Yeah, I think if you enjoy one, you should be able to enjoy the other pretty easily. And
yes,
it's just a matter.
Well, we have this competition coming up. May I tell them about? Because this is a good example. Al McCree and I we have a brainstorming session once a year to just help promote Jeannie. I have this team Jeannie people in Nashville that work and help me. And 2 or 3 years ago, I said, I ought to have a contest. Let the winner come on and open up for me and see, and this kind of thing. We said, no, let's put it on the back burner. Well, the burner has moved forward. And we didn't know whether to call it. Now, here's the difference with just discussing what we were talking. Al wanted to call it the Jeanne Robertson Comedy with Class competition because his company is called Comedy with Class. And I said, but I'm not a straight comedian. I'm a humorist. He said, well, you're going to lose a lot. So this is the name of the competition is the Jeanne Robertson Comedy with Class Humor Competition. And it's running right now until, I think, the first week in August. It started last Saturday. Yeah. You send in an 8-minute set. And you do not go rent an auditorium. You do not, bring in 100 people you can do it in front of your friends, but you use your cell phone, this, that, and the other. The judges can look at that and know, how good can you hold an audience in the palm of your hand for 8 minutes? And a lot of people, it's a little, and I know, and so do your listeners, it's a little tougher than you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Look out there, and there's 1,000 people or 1,500. But if I had seen this when I was 40, I would have printed it out if we had them at the time, gone upstairs to my husband so fast and said, look, I've got to do this. And then the winner will win $1,000, and then we'll pay for them to come. And it can be any age over 18, but your material has to be your material. So that's going on, and I just think that would be fun, don't you?
Yeah, I think everybody listening, I'll put it in the show notes, but you can go to comedywithclass.com/competition. Read all about it. Like Jeannie said, 8 minutes. It's Comedy with Class, so that means clean. $1,500 in cash prizes, and if you win, Jeannie and Al McCree will find a stage that works for you to get up in front of her and do 8 minutes. And
if you can tell them in a way that entertains people, then you will be welcomed because people like to be entertained. We say you can bring your mama or your teenagers to my shows and not be looking out different windows of the car because you're so embarrassed when you're doing it.
That's a great way to put it.
And I'm no prude. I love to see we just say this is a little more clever use of the word. And if it doesn't work, we won't do it again. If it works, we'll do it again. But the place we're going to find for you to do it's going to be one of my shows. We want you to walk out there, and I'll introduce you and do the 8 minutes. So you're one of our judges, aren't you, Rick?
I believe I am.
I don't know what you said. Now you sound apprehensive.
Well, I'm just thinking about all my listeners. They're going to email me and go, "Hey, man, I've been listening to your podcast. You're going to help me out."
Yeah. Well, good, but we put up the judges' pictures, so hey, we're locked in. It's just a fun thing. Hey, life's about having fun.
That's great. Well, Jeannie, I'm super happy I got a chance to meet you last week and to spend more time with you today. I'll put this episode out before the deadline. If you listen to this episode, you'll have about a week or so to get in there and get your clip on.
And if you can't remember all of the slashes and backslashes, you can go to JeanneRobertson.com. And Jeannie doesn't have an I in it, just Jeannie. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you helping us with the competition. And I wouldn't have told them you were a judge if your name wasn't sitting right there and your picture and your write-up.
No, I'm happy to do it. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the videos and looking forward to seeing you in Nashville at the Ryman. I'll make sure I put your website on the show notes so people can look at that, see where you're coming close to them. And if you haven't seen Jeannie, if for some reason this is the first time you found out about Jeannie, also look her up on YouTube. Thanks, Jeannie. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate you doing this today.
Call me if I can ever help you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Jeanne Robertson, my new friend. And wow, doesn't she deliver? She's you can tell she's funny, but she's also very smart, and she treats it like a business, and that's why she's been able to do this for 50 plus years. Man, I hope I'm still going strong when I hit my 70s. If I can do anything close to where she's at, I'll be excited and super happy. You want to go to her site, JeanneRobertson.com. It's JeanneRobertson.com. Robertson.com. You also want to check out comedywithclass.com/competition, and you have until August 5th to submit an up to 8-minute clip. As you heard her say, it doesn't have to be on stage in front of a 300-seater. It can be into your phone, telling a story, being funny while you're doing it, keeping it classy, and she will take one of the winners and put them on stage in front of her to do an 8-minute set. And listen, if you're listening and you're thinking about doing this, do it. Do it. I'm one of the judges. There are other judges, so I don't have final say by any means, but I'll be looking at videos as they come through and forwarding them on to the other judges and ultimately to Jeannie to pick out the winner. But golden opportunity right here, folks, and you have again until August 5th to do this. That's why I released the episode a week early. We didn't have a week off this time because I didn't want you guys to miss out on this. Get on our email list. Check her out on YouTube. I've put links in the show notes. And if you are in the Nashville, Tennessee area, a couple things. First off, don't forget Jeannie is going to be at the Ryman Auditorium on September 10th. That's a Sunday. Showtime is 6 o'clock. I'm going. If you decide on going too, let me know. We'll meet up maybe for dinner before that and have a little School of Laughs field trip. That'd be pretty fun. I'm definitely going to see that show. Also, in August, the writing class is back at it here in Nashville, Tennessee. It'll be August 14th, 21st, and 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. The class takes place just a mile up the road from Zanies, and it's going to be a fun time. You don't want to miss out on it. Plus, you get a chance to actually learn comedy techniques that go into every joke that stand-ups write. Without a technique in your joke, it's just an opinion, and you're hoping that the crowd laughs. With a technique, you can trigger a laugh, and that's what it's all about. So again, if you want to find out about those classes, go to schooloflaughs.com, click on the comedy class link, and again, the summer special going on for the online class, Better Comedy, all capital letters, will get you 20% off the silver edition of the online class. That's it for now. Thanks again. Don't forget to leave an iTunes review if you liked us, or follow us on Twitter at School of Laughs. Until next time, folks, stay safe and stay funny.
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.